Welcome to Modern Mindset, the show that picks the brains of the world's leading minds to help you unlock yours. Decoding the beliefs and strategies of global experts to give you an updated mindset to make the most of modern life. Hosted by the UK's most in-demand and highest-paid hypnotherapist, Adam Cox.
This is Modern Mindset, the show that picks the brains of the world's leading minds to help you unlock yours. I'm your host, Adam Cox, and joining me today, we have transformational coach, Elliott Harlin Bethell. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me today. Been really looking forward to this.
Yeah, great to have you. We've been connected for at least a year or two, and I've been seeing some of the adventures and some of the unique ways that you kind of approach health and wellness and things like that. But I guess a good place to start is, what was the catalyst for you to, let's say, break with the conventions? Because the life script for a lot of people, go to school, study, uni, get a job, and you've taken a very different path. Was there a particular catalyst for that kind of direction?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say break, because that's pretty much exactly what it was, brother. It was, I was living a pretty extravagant life. I had a beautiful fiance, lovely daughter, 4-bedroom house, 3 level floors, 2 cars, 5 Rolexes. It was, people from the outside would have looked at me and thought, this guy's absolutely smashing it. But internally, I was fucking in bits, mate. It was almost as if my soul couldn't actually live within my body, because I was holding so much shame and guilt and fear. The vibrational level of my soul just couldn't stand me. It was almost as if it had escaped and gone. It was like, I've had enough of this. I'm off, mate. Until you sort yourself out, I'm off. And I was doing a lot of drugs at the time, and I decided to do everything backwards. I lost everything. I lost my cars, the house, my fiance, my daughter. And it was a real low point. I don't think I got out of bed for about 4 days. And whilst laying in bed, I just started breathing differently one day, and I started looking into meditation, and started looking into these other things. And I started to think to myself, like, what if everything I've been taught is wrong? What if everything I've been taught is history? What if that is his story? And I'm here to create my story. So I need to break everything down. And I started looking into shamanism, and they say we need to unlearn everything from the age of 1 to 7 when we're in a theta brainwave, because this is when we're like a sponge. And interestingly enough, there's a saying, I think the church says, give me a boy from the age of 1 to 7 and I'll give you a man. So I literally started to write down most of the things I'd learned as a child at school from the age of 1 to 7. Like, why am I right-handed? Am I actually right-handed? Is this something to split me? Am I actually ambidextrous? So I started doing little things every day, like brushing my teeth with my left hand, and then writing in my left hand, and then predominantly playing golf with my left hand, playing snooker left-handed. And what I started to notice this took me out of my normal program or paradigm. It brought me into the present moment. And I was kind of shown by my guides that there's many times when I've driven to work, and I got to work and I thought, how the fuck did I get here? I can't even remember driving here today. And it's because I was driving to work the same way every day, listening to the same music every day, that it was almost like I was in an asleep state, that I'd just drive to work and I wouldn't know how I got there. So I'd start driving to work a different way. And ultimately, when we step out of this vibration that we've created for ourselves, we start to see other vibrations that maybe were veiled or weren't there before. And then I started meditation. And this was a big step for me, because all my years growing up, I kind of thought it was very important to be constantly thinking. Like, the more I could think, the cleverer I would be. And I think this is quite a common misconception, but in fact, it's virtually the opposite. And I enrolled myself in a 3-hour meditation class in Lewisham in London. And I was really nervous going, and I was sitting in this room with about 20 people. And I just remember after about 10 minutes, actually physically looking for exits, because I was so far away from the door that I didn't want to make a scene and get up and leave. But if there was a window that was open, I'd gladly jump out of it, even if I was on the 2nd floor, because I thought, these people are so crazy. How can they sit here? And my body wanted to move. And again, it was almost like I had to distract myself with video games, with girls, with sex, with all of these things. And I couldn't sit still. And I started to journal everything and to write down my journey, because I thought there's got to be something to this. I'm meeting so many people that are going through similar things. I've always been very, very good at finding something or seeing patterns in something, and then working backwards and finding the root of it, and then finding the reason why it happened. So I started to journal everything, and one day out of the blue, I saw this guy on the internet. Because I think I'd slightly started to raise my vibration, things started to come to me, which again, we're always told you've got to work hard for things, but I think that's one of the worst sayings anybody can say. I think working smarter for things is so much a better saying, because anything that's spoken within a low vibration just keeps us in that low vibration, and it doesn't open doors for us. But once we start spinning upwards or ascending or enlightening ourselves, letting go of any heavy vibrations like guilt, fear, or shame, things start coming to us. You know yourself that when we're on a roll, and we always know someone who's like, I'm constantly ill, and they're constantly ill because, and this was another thing that was pointed out to me, that our cells listen to every thought and feeling we have. I'm sure we'll touch on this a little bit later on, but it's one of my beliefs that if I wanted to, at some point within the next 2 to 3 years, I could go stage 4 breatharianism, which is no food, no water, but still taking baths and showers. So it's not hard dry fasting, it's dry fasting, and just surviving on prana, on chi, on life force energy, on sunlight, and on the proton, neutron, electron exchange, if we was to stand on the earth bare feet. So yeah, that's pretty much how my journey began, mate.
Yeah. So, I mean, it seemed to me for you to be on that pathway of, to what the external world would judge as success, career, money, family, partner, all those kind of things. But to have that kind of deeply unsettled feeling at some level, there must have been this kind of feeling of being an imposter at some level, that you're living someone else's life rather than your own life. And it was really interesting you say there about that kind of autopilot response, because, as a hypnotist, I work with people all the time, and I'll say, have you been in a trance? Or have you experienced hypnosis before? And they're like thinking, no. And then I have to let them know that we go in and out of trances all the time, and driving the same journey is a good example of an unconscious trance-like state. So we enter these states all the time. So was there a point of threshold, like a straw that broke the camel's back, that, something happened and it's kind of like, it all changes now? Because you had a lot invested in that lifestyle, the material trappings, the mortgage, the house, all those kind of things. To walk away from that is going to take a lot of balls. Was it a choice that you made to walk away, or was that choice kind of made for you from external events?
Well, that's a really good question, but I think the answer would have depended on whether you'd have asked me then or now, because ultimately I got to a stage where I didn't want to live, and I didn't want to commit suicide, because I love people. I felt like I loved myself, but I'd been in and out of buying and selling and taking a lot of drugs at certain points in my life, and I picked up around sort of £3,000 worth of cocaine, and I just decided I was just going to, when I had a moment, when I had some spare time, I was just going to sit, and for a week, I'd just plow my way through it and sit there with a few friends. And I could make my life look as if it was very normal from the outside. I wouldn't sleep. I'd get up in the morning. I'd say goodbye to people. And then I'd go straight back and carry on. And after around 3 to 5 days of not sleeping, you really start to pick up on things. You pick up on different frequencies. You start to hear different things. You can understand why people would say you was mad. And I've actually been back and explored this at a much deeper level, because after listening to Steve Jobs' autobiography, he used to play around with sleep deprivation quite a bit, along with LSD and fasting. The reason he called apple was because he'd regularly go to India and he wouldn't eat anything but apples for, say, 40 days, which is quite interesting. But after that week went past with no sleep and no food, I suppose subconsciously, one of the reasons I always believed that I'd never done any serious damage to my body when I used to do a lot of drugs and not sleep was I'd never forced myself to eat afterwards. And this is what I'm shown looking back. Everybody in my circle around me would be like, we haven't eaten for 3 days. We haven't eaten for 2 days. They'd force themselves to eat. And not only that, but they're forcing themselves to eat things like pizzas and McDonald's, which are like, on a vibrational level, the amount of stabilizers and things, even the word stabilizer, if we're vibrational light beings, why would you want to put something in you to stabilize you? gum. Why would you want to put a gum in you? Because these things are just going to slow your vibration down. We want to be ascending in vibration. We want to be shining brighter. And looking back on it, the amount of drugs I did do, it's a lot of people say to me, like, if you was to die, we'd probably want to sniff your ashes just to see what would happen, because it's just looking back on it, it's, again, for me to look back and to see what the lesson was, it's that nothing's bad for you unless you believe it's bad for you. Because I did go back and experience all of the things I used to do from a different level. And I love words, and people say like recreational drugs, and the word rec is to destroy, but we can also say recreational drugs. And again, it just depends on what perspective we put on things and the intention we use things with, because alcohol can be used to save lives. It can be used to destroy lives. Tobacco is one of the most powerful high vibration things for warding off negative energies. But if we take the piss with it and people smoke it unlimited, it's one of the biggest killers on the planet. So we live in a dual world where there's warm, hot and cold, and dark and light. And if we take the piss in these areas, then they're going to bite us in the arse. But when we learn how to use them properly, and we learn that we are part of them, and we come back to that center point, it's like we can choose where we want to go and play, as long as we always bring ourselves back to that center point, instead of getting, I admittedly got lost off in this side, but I found it very fun for a while. So,
yeah, I mean, that kind of gives me an insight, because it sounds to me like if you're deeply unhappy at a point where you're meant to be happy, therein lies the conflict. And 9 times out of 10, when people feel conflicted, at some level, they want to consciously or subconsciously sabotage that situation, because the status quo is not pleasant. And therefore, if you sabotage it, at least change provides the possibility of something better. Did it feel like sabotage at the time, or did it feel like escapism? What was going on there in terms of, because you're right, the intention is everything. And perhaps you could do exactly the same thing now that you were doing back then, but your intention would be entirely different. What was the intention back then?
I think the intention was the feeling I was chasing, but looking back on it, my soul was creating a tower moment for me to expand. Because we don't become diamonds. We don't become diamonds from coal without pressure being applied, do we? We don't make wine without squeezing those grapes. And I was so comfortable that comfort was the destroyer of my dreams. I always knew that I was capable of so much more, but because I was just sitting in a house with a 60-inch fucking TV and 2 cars and changing watches every day, and it was almost as if my soul was saying, come on, you can do more than this. You need to get out and start speaking to people and spreading certain words and light, and just being a better example to people, as opposed to, I really do think comfort, it can be the killer of all dreams if you let it.
Massively. And, what strikes me here, I've got the picture of this kind of the Venn diagram of Ikigai, where it seems like financially doing very well. So clearly you've got competency. People are willing to pay you for your work. There's clearly a need for it. But it seems to me that there was deep lack of fulfillment at that point, which means you weren't really in line with, what you were meant to do. Did that give you clues as to what your purpose was and what you should be doing more of when you kind of got through that dark place?
Yes. Well, what I did was I started to read a lot of books as well. And one of the first books I read, which is still one of my favorite books to this day, is the Celestine Prophecy.
That's great. Yeah.
And in that book, it says to you, at some point, you'll have this reflection where you'll look back at your parents, and you'll realize why you chose your parents and what lessons they were here to teach you. And at the time when I was making a lot of money, I had my own hair salon, and I was buying and selling vintage Rolexes. So it wasn't, if I told you I never wanted to be a hairdresser, I fell into that job. I got trained by a guy who was very high up at Nicky Clark's in London. At that point, I was useless with girls, and all of a sudden I was in a college with 19 girls, and it was appealing for the wrong reasons. But then looking back at the 15 years I worked in that industry, I had a different client between 10 and 15 times every hour, or 10 and 15 times every 45 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes. And by the end of, within 5 years of that job, someone could walk through my door and I knew how to speak to them and how to make them feel good about themselves the second they walk through the door. So I'd say to my staff, like, I'm fully booked all of the time, and I don't particularly think I'm a great hairdresser. You guys are better hairdressers than me, but why am I fully booked and you're not fully booked? And it's because people want that relationship. They want that. And I started to realize I was probably more of a psychologist than I was a hairdresser, really. But to be able to read people's energy and be able to, so yeah, just generally raise people's vibrations and make them feel good about themselves. And not only that, but to point out if someone's going through something tough, to not put shame or guilt on that, but to maybe offer up a perspective where that person realizes it for themselves and then unlocks their potential. That's what made me feel good. And when I started doing this, I had several billionaire clients, and they said to me, when you find a job that you do for free, that's when you're free, completely free of everything. And I started doing this in 2018, and I did it for free for like 6 months. And the amount of high vibes and pleasure I got from it, it was almost like I said, I'd do this for free. I'd quite happily have another job and do this for free. And that's when people start coming to you for money. It's beautiful how it works when you realize how vibration works.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I'm kind of seeing echoes in my own life, because I had I still have a very successful PR company, but I didn't have that fulfillment. And I was getting these kind of intuitive thoughts of, what am I interested in? What am I passionate in? And it's kind of like, it's how people think. It's how people make decisions. It's the thought process. It's the idea of change. And, when I went into the world of hypnosis, I wasn't particularly academic, but then suddenly I'm getting like distinctions and top of the class and all this kind of stuff, because it was aligned with where I was meant to be. And then suddenly, like you, I would quite happily do hypnosis for free. But when you bring that energy to it, paradoxically, you get paid more than you would ever dream of, because you're doing it from the intention of actually making a difference, which is a completely different frequency to what most people have, which is they're doing things reluctantly and they'd rather be anywhere else but where they are, and they're only there for the money. Well, vibrationally, that's a very low vibration, and people can sense that difference. So I'm seeing lots of echoes there.
So it's stepping from service to self to service to others, isn't it? And the second you start serving others, it all comes back to you. Whereas when you're stuck in a job where you're self-serving and you're just doing it to get money, it's very much like, I thought when I was 26, I just bought myself like $100,000 Audi R8. I thought that was the peak of everything. 2 years later, I was miserable. 2 years later, I'm driving around a £250 Skoda. I'm the happiest person in the world. I've got a beautiful girlfriend. It's like I had these sort of peaks of having money where I was never happy, and then these drops where what I found was every time I had a drop, I'd start looking outside of the boxes that I used to say the boxes that I was put in, but the boxes that ultimately I chose to let my energy be put in. Because when we're born, I'd say the first box we're put in is food. We're put on our mother's boob 3 times a day. We're fed 3 times a day. That becomes our first paradigm or program, apart from being put to bed. Otherwise, we just go to bed and go to sleep with circadian rhythm. But when the first fast I ever took a group of guys on, I took them into the Cotswolds in 2017, and I did 7 days, no food, no water, no contact water. That was the aim for these guys. One of them did 6 and one of them did 5. And they come out of it and they was like, Google said we die after 3 days without water. Like, what else can I do that I didn't believe I could do? And once you break down that oldest first program or that oldest first paradigm that's been created, that you've given your energy away to, and you take that back away from that, all of a sudden, this whole reality is like, wow, what else have I given my energy to? Like, should I be doing this? Should I be doing this? And you start chipping away at little things. And it's almost like that shamanistic way of saying, unlearn everything, so that when you do it yourself, you're unlearning knowledge that you were taught. And then through experience, you create your own world. You cherry pick what you want. And then when that comes into your subconscious, ultimately, that's all you're going to see, because the rest of it's going to drop out and you won't see it anymore, because that vibration it becomes veiled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is that kind of invisibility cloak, the positive and negative. There's things that, are desirable that you could see that you can't see when you have certain belief systems and certain ways of looking at the world. And when those belief systems change and the values change, suddenly a whole new world opens up that you couldn't see before, and vice versa. Let's talk about fasting, because I've done a few food fasts, not certainly as long as you have. But my first experience of fasting was I saw a documentary by a guy called Joe Cross, Australian guy. He had a documentary called Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead. And he's overweight and he's got all these kind of autoimmune issues and all this kind of stuff. And he says, right, you know what? I'm going to trust my immune system to heal if I give it the right kind of food and that kind of stuff. And he decided to have nothing but juice. So like mainly vegetable juice, but occasional fruit juice for 60 days. And I watched that and I was like, yeah, but could you really do that? So I thought, right, let's give it a go. So this is kind of like around about 7 years ago. And I did 60 days of only juicing and smoothies. And for the first 24, 48 hours, I'm like, this is easy. I'm bragging about how easy it is. And then reality. And I remember having a conversation with my dad, telling him what I'm doing. He thinks I'm insane. It's like, and I'm saying, I'm looking at my arm and I want to chew my own arm off. I'm that hungry. But it was my body adjusting to a smaller stomach size and getting used to kind of the fructose as a source of energy rather than other things. And then eventually your body adapts and it always adapts. And then you're sleeping like 4 or 5 hours a night. You're waking up, you're always alert. The people I was working with, they're like, it's not healthy. Meanwhile, they're tucking into a chocolate bar or, going outside for a cigarette break, and all these kind of preconceived ideas about how you should live and what you should eat and all these kind of stuff all comes to the forefront. And I'm thinking, isn't it weirder? Not that you're eating natural food that kind of grows in the earth, but to rely on processed foods that are kind of made in factories. But we're so conditioned that there is a way that you're meant to eat that anyone that does anything slightly different is kind of thought of as a bit odd. Now, I know you've done lots of fasts. Have you experienced that kind of, let's say, judgment or kind of prejudices? The fact that you're doing something different kind of threatens other people's kind of worldview.
So the first fast I did without the use of drugs and consciously was in 2017. And that was 7 days, no food, no water, no contact with water. So that's no brushing your teeth, no showering, no bathing. And I didn't tell anyone I was doing it because I knew the power of projection. I knew that if someone was to say to me and project the energy of, you can't do that, because I wasn't that much of an energy worker at the time, I didn't know how to protect my energy field. I knew that would affect me. And the way I say this in my talks is, if you ever want to recreate yourself, go on holiday, because if you haven't got someone projecting their normal energy onto you, you can recreate yourself very quickly. Everybody's got a voice they go into the bank and talk to the bank manager to. Everyone's got a voice they talk to their mum to. Their mum's got a projection of you. There's thousands of versions of you walking around with inside people's heads. And to take yourself away from that gives you it gives you a blank canvas, because you can then start projecting out without any projections onto you. But yes, I have experienced that. But talking about the healing part of that, it's very interesting. You said about changing through the fructose and the sugars and stuff, because I started to look at animals, and dogs are an interesting one. If they're ill, they will eat grass, they'll throw up, and they won't eat again until they're well. Now, I'm an energy worker as well. So I'm qualified in Rohani, which is like a form of Reiki. And we have 114 chakras within our body. And the 7 main ones, the root, the sacral, the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, the third eye, and the crown, they go red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Now, for anyone that was at school, I can sing a rainbow. This is a rainbow. Now, it's my belief we're light beings. In the Gospel of Thomas that was left out of the Bible, there's a saying, if they ask you where you come from, where would you say you come from? And he says, I come from the light, where the light came into being upon itself and made itself manifest. And he says, how can you prove this? And he says, through movement and repose. Now, movement and repose is vibration and frequency. So if we're ill, take everything away from the body. And what do we need to create a rainbow? We need sunlight and water. So take everything away from the body and just give it sunlight and water, and all of a sudden these energy centers start firing up again. Now, when the energy centers start firing up within the body heals itself. So why are we sticking all these chemicals in our body that then need more chemicals? It's just an ongoing process. It's a business. And I watched a film by a guy, and it's called Earthing. You can go onto YouTube and just type in Earthing movie. And he talks about inflammation within the body. And they do a study, and they put them up to a machine, and they see the inflammation in this person's body is at about 70%. Now, if you go to a doctor, they're going to give you all sorts of tablets, and you're only going to get that down to about 20%. And you're probably going to need other tablets to get off those tablets. And this person goes outside, they take their shoes and socks off, which is rubber, and rubber's non-conductive. They stand on the grass for 45 minutes, they go back in, 99% of that inflammation's gone from the body.
Wow.
Because the proton, neutron, electron exchange through the body, we're designed to work in unison. We're an ecosystem. So when we know how the body's working properly, we don't need anything outside of us. Everything we need is within us. As within, so without. So when we're fasting, what we're doing is we're cleaning the internals of the body. And it's almost like you clean the externals of the body. I noticed when I started heavily fasting, I wrote an article probably about 5 years ago saying governments were going to collapse, royal families were going to fall, schooling systems are going to start to crash, and the pharmaceutical industries are going to start to crash. Because when people start holding a certain level of integrity and truth, anything that's not holding that level of integrity and truth will have to vibrate out of that area. And so many people I speak to now are holding a higher level of integrity. They're speaking their truth, that when someone, say, i.e. a politician, comes and tries to avoid your question, the more you ask them and the more you're holding that vibration, their vibration either has to exit or has to succumb to speaking the truth. So that's what I see what's going on with the planet at the moment. And it's a blessing to be alive at the moment, because from what I see, we've stepped out of a 25,950 year iron age, and we're stepping back into a golden age where the vibration and the amount of light we're getting on the planet is just going to shake everything up, and anything that's of a guilt or a shame or a lie or that sort of vibration is just going to get brought to the surface to be transmuted. But a big part of this is forgiveness as well. We can't be shaming governments and saying you shouldn't have done this. We've got to hold them in a space of compassion and understanding. So that's my view on that.
Yeah, totally. And I think most people, even if they don't really understand a lot of this stuff, have experienced it, in terms of energy connected to emotions. And if they're angry, and if they're kind of what you would call low vibrational, kind of energy, there's jealousy, envy, whatever it might be. They don't feel inspired and motivated, and they're not like, making positive things happen. But when they're in those other kind of emotions like love or gratitude, they're completely different, same person, but of a different version of that person. And you're saying that when you go through that fasting process, that actually shifts your energy.
So I'm writing a book at the moment, and I always like to play with words and stuff. The book's called Hard, Dry, Fast, Sometimes Wet, and it covers every single aspect of fasting. And the healing modality that I've been creating and working on for the last 5 years, and I've taken over 2,000 people through various types of fasts, is that you've just mentioned that water and emotion. You've probably heard of Masaru Emoto and the hidden effects of sound on water. Now, our body is roughly 72% water. Now, from what I'm shown and from what I've been working with, is that we store water in the fat cells in the body. And when we dry fast, we use this water, but it's like the recesses of it. It's like what a camel stores in its hump for emergencies. So we're probably carrying around in this 72% water. There's probably like 10% in there that we've been carrying around from childhood, from when we're 4 years old. And that could be from when an adult's given you a smack and said, you shouldn't fucking be doing that. Don't do that again. And our aura's closed in. We've held onto that emotion and it's stored within the fat cell. And when we do dry fasts for 72 hours, what I've noticed, especially in groups and retreats, and people say to me, is that they start crying about stuff that they remember from childhood. And it's because it's stored in such a deep level, with the breath work we do, with the grounding we do, with the eye gazing, with the emotional work. I really encourage people to cry, and we do temazcals or saunas so we can sweat some of this out as well. And part of the process is, at the beginning, we take a bottle of alkaline water and we squeeze a lemon into it to alkalize it a little bit more. And we place around half a teaspoon of pink Himalayan salt into it. And the reason we do that is that's got 84 of the 92 minerals found in the body. And you probably remember at school, when we take minerals out of water, it's non-conductive. When we place minerals into water, it's conductive. Now, with this water stays with you. You have it by the side of your bed every single night while you're doing the retreat or while you're doing one of my fasts. I ask you to come up with 12 affirmations that you'd like to embody or channel. And I generally suggest the first three are I'm abundantly healthy, I'm abundantly prosperous, and I'm abundantly happy. Because it's my belief as a foundation, if you've got health, happiness, and money, everything else is just enjoyment, or it's not really a need, it's more of a want. And then you pick 9 on top of that. And the first day, what I get these guys to do is to write these 12 affirmations with their dominant hand, and then to write these affirmations with their non-dominant hand. Because once we start writing it with the non-dominant hand, they find it very difficult, and it brings them into the present moment. And in studies, it's shown that it increases the corpus callosum that divides the 2 brain hemispheres. Now, I'm not sure if you know, but with people like Albert Einstein and Isaac Newton, it was said that they weren't very clever up until a certain age, but in some of their autopsies, it was shown that their corpus callosum was actually quite wide. So the 2 brain hemispheres were firing on both cylinders, making the 2 into 1, no separation. So not sort of spiritual thinking, and not say 3D thinking. And we speak these affirmations into the water every morning when we first wake, when generally we're in more of a theta brainwave, and last thing before we go to bed. So it's like we set these intentions into the water. And as in Masaru Emoto's studies, when you speak certain words to water, the water creates certain crystalline effects. So when you say I love you to it, it creates like an angelic shape. If you say I hate you to it, it goes all polluted. Now, this happens to the water in the body when someone speaks to you negatively, like neuro-linguistic programming. If I say to you, oh, I love you, or I fucking love you, the water in your body is going to have a slightly different effect on it. So in effect, what we're doing with this water throughout the week, and it's staying within your energy field, is you're programming the water. And then at the end of the fast, your body's very diluted. It hasn't got any water in it. We've got rid of all that old stored emotion. So it's like we've taken out our old hard drive out of a computer, and we've said, thank you. We've released all of this. We thank you for your service. We're letting you go now with ease and grace. And we say goodbye to all of that. And then when we break the fast, we all sit in a circle and we have a ceremony where you're so grateful for this water, because by this point, your mouth is drier than Gandhi's flip-flop. You're ready to break your fast. It's going to be the best tasting water you've ever had. And what I try to emphasize to people is that the gratitude we have for food is actually more powerful than the nutrients that are in the food. And the reason in the Bible we say grace to food is that food on our plate, especially in modern world, the tomatoes have probably come from halfway across the world. The potatoes have probably come from somewhere else. And we don't know what energies these foods have been around. And they could have picked up various different vibrations and energies along the way. But when we say gratitude, when it's in our energy field, it's almost like wiping it clean. So you're putting a higher vibration, gratitude, unconditional love. These are all high vibrations. And then when we drink this water, it's like we've taken out that old hard drive and we're now putting the new hard drive in. And I've had some people with inflammation problems, with things like Crohn's disease and things like this, literally saying they're not taking their medication anymore afterwards, because it's like a master reset for the body. And not only have I found that it's good for like a physical thing, mentally, it's almost like you clear the vortex of your energy field. So anyone who listens to the law of attraction, or to Abraham and the lady that does that, she'll talk about placing things into your vortex and waiting for them to come back. But if we've got too much in our vortex, you're never going to see the things you're putting in. I find that fasting, especially fasting from TV and events, environments and circumstances, it really clears our energy field, so that when we then place those affirmations into it, we see these manifestations come through much quicker.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. And obviously, you know, I'm hearing this through the, you know, the perspective of a hypnotist. And it strikes me that, you know, you've got the viewpoint of energy, but you've also got the viewpoint of, there's a suggestion linked to that water that represents the 12 affirmations. And then almost a post-hypnotic suggestion, as you drink the water, you're absorbing these affirmations into you at the point when you've got a desperate, kind of literal thirst, for that water, metaphorically, it's kind of like where you've excreted the old and you've had something new. So I think at many different levels, that's a very powerful shift, because you can't really be the same person before that fast, because you've gone through a bit of a psychological journey and you've drunk the water that has a representation of new beliefs. But it's not just the belief system and the kind of the energy. There's also tangible health benefits, and we touched on autophagy before the show. If you could, just for the, let's say, uneducated listening, things like dry fast, wet fast, autophagy, even things like ketosis, can you give a quick introduction to some of the biological things and how the different fasts impact those?
Of course. So when we go into a fasting state, first of all, food is not the only energy we consume. Sound is, the thoughts, the way we speak, the things we read, the people, the events, the environments, and the circumstances are all also energy. And when we fast from food and water for the first 24 to 36 hours, your body's going to switch from burning sugars to burning fats. And that's like going from diesel to petrol. What I find personally, it's a cleaner form of energy. It's a very hard stage because sugar is like a drug. Food is like a drug. And when we come off sugar, I mean, if you look at brain scans of people eating sugar, it's probably worse than people taking heroin. So when we come off that sugar and we start burning fat, we then start burning fat for fuel. And then once we start using this fat for fuel, we go into something around 72 hours called autophagy. Now, autophagy is the body's self-defense mechanism. It's like we are such a powerful instrument that if we deprive our body of food and water, if the body's got a very slight onset of something like a first stage of cancer, your body will actually eat that cancer for energy before it eats the positive energy within the body. So it's survival of the fittest. You're going to eat whatever's the weakest within your body, and you're going to be left with the strongest version of yourself. There's no wonder to why people like Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, all these people throughout the history of time have all used fasting. All these different religions have done it. And from my personal experience and from the retreats and the workshops and the online stuff that I work with people, the shifts that people have, and I mean, just last week, I guided around 105 people through a 5-day fast where there was a 72-hour dry fasting period. Now, I'd always advise people to start hard dry fasting. Now, hard dry fasting is when there's no food, no water, and no contact with water. So this is the most extreme version. This means there's no brushing your teeth, there's no washing, there's no showering. You literally probably would want to take a couple of days off work and just, chill and not have too many vibrations around you and really go internal and see what comes up. Dry fasting is when we don't eat anything, we don't drink anything, but you can still take baths and showers. Then we have wet fasting, which is you can drink water, and then they have juice fasting, obviously, which is pretty self-explanatory. I always advise people to go hard dry at first. And then what I would say is if you start to feel like you want to break that fast, I've had people, because my phone is on 24 hours a day when I'm working with someone. I've had people phone me up at 1 o'clock in the morning and be like, I phoned you because I want to drink some water now. And I've talked them through it, and we've done some guided meditations. Now, one of the first guided meditations I'll take people through, and you can find this on my YouTube channel, is taste meditation. And I do meditations around the 5 main senses: touch, taste, sound, smell, and sight. And what I get people to do on the first day of their fast is I get them to visualize with their eyes shut, shutting off all the senses apart from taste, biting into a lemon. And when you bite into a lemon visually, first of all, your mouth starts to fill up with saliva because it brings up such a 5-dimensional feeling of bitterness that your mouth creates that saliva. Then I get them to take a lemon and I get them to actually bite the lemon. And we go through a visualization where they almost download that feeling. And when they download it, we then come out and we take a few breaths, sniff some coffee, and they go back into it again. And it's even deeper because they've just had the lemon and they can feel it. Now, when we get into the fast and we're in 48 hours and someone starts to get a dry mouth, the first thing I'd say to them is sit down, go into that meditative state, bring in that lemon, bang, all of a sudden their mouth's filled up with saliva. They haven't got dry mouth anymore. All of a sudden they can push through the fast a little bit further. So you can do this with dark chocolate as well. Anything that's got a bitter taste to it or provokes a reaction within the body, it's like we don't need that thing outside of us. We can train ourselves to create that within, and then it expresses without of us. The next step would be to run a bath and to put some magnesium and some pink Himalayan salts in it. And then to sit in that bath for 45 minutes. In 45 minutes, your body can absorb up to 0.9 liters of water externally. So we'd sit in it and we'd play some 432 hertz music or some 528 hertz music, which naturally lowers the breathing, deeper breathing, slows down the heart rate, and brings us into a more relaxed state. I've only had, out of everyone that's fasted me, less than that one handful of people break their fast and phone me up and tell me they've done it. Everybody else that's phoned me up, I've managed to do an energy exchange with them and get them through the fast. And it's so much more empowering for someone to get through it and be like, holy shit, last week, 5 people actually extended it and did 5 days dry fasting and not 3 days, because they was like, this has been so easy. We want to push it on for a further few days. And that's generally what happens.
Mm. There's going to be fears just because, you know, there are conditioned beliefs that we have about how much we should be eating, how much we should be drinking, you know, and the idea that, you know, a hard, dry fast, you know, no food, no water, no baths, there's going to be inner dialogue inside people's heads that says, that's not safe. You know, I'm going to die, you know, these kind of things. You know, are they, you know, kind of rational thoughts, or are these just kind of echoes of what we've been taught since we were children?
And they're rational thoughts for that person, because there were rational thoughts for me 5 years ago when I first did it. But I'm not sure if you know anything about human design. Have you heard of human design?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a 1 to 3 emotional manifestor, which is an investigator martyr. So generally, my design type is someone who will do something that people are scared of doing, and then will come back and say, oh, hang on, I've just done this. If we're all standing at the edge of a cliff and we're looking at the sea, I'm the one who's going to run and jump off and go, oh, come down, it's safe. So I sat with my thoughts, and I was at a position where I think I said to you, I was willing to die, and I'd set myself the target. And when I'd got to the 5th day and the 6th day and the 7th day, and I was stronger, my clarity was better, because I'd got to that point and my vibration had stepped out. I'd never met anybody who had fasted for longer than 3 days before that, because I was constantly eating 3 to 5 times a day, because I have a bit of a bodybuilding background as well. When I was 25, I was about 15.5 stone, 5% body fat. So I've explored eating 2 chickens a day to veganism, to plant-based, now to almost breatharianism at times. So this is why I feel I can actually talk about this and have a very decent opinion on it. I noticed that I felt better. And what I noticed was that then I started to meet people that were doing the same as me. But had I not experienced it and got to that level of vibration, I would have never have met those people, because if I'm eating 3 times a day, I'm only ever going to see this far forward, because my light's only going to shine this far forward. But the second I started to get to that 7 days, I then met someone who had done 2 weeks. And then I met a lady who had done 90 days. And then I come in contact with some Russians that had done 90 days, no food, no water, and no sleep, and were running businesses during the night. And then I started to get in contact with people that have done over a year without food and water, but they live in nature and they live out in water, like near lakes and streams and stuff. So when I talk to people and they're like, you can't go a year without food and water, I'm like, there's several stage 4 breatharians that have actually done longer than this now. There's been people that have been scientifically studied for 3 months, where their urinary tract is filling up with urine, because the pores in their skin are taking moisture out of the air. But it's almost like they're not actually going to the toilet. And something else that I've played around with on that note is urine therapy as well. That's something I've been on and off with for about 3 years now. That might be another subject for another time, but I just thought I'd plant that seed.
Yeah, no, I'm assuming that's kind of drinking your own urine, you know, perhaps with sterilized water to kind of boost your immune system. Is that right? Or
yeah, so it's not just that; it's also using it as a healing property. For instance, if I said to you, I had 10 stitches here, 14 stitches here, 8 stitches here, and 30 stitches here at one point. I didn't have any painkillers for this one when it was stitched up. Refused to. I just meditated through that one, and then I used my own urine as the instead of using the creams that they gave me, I was using my own urine. And if you look into studies behind this, if you use your own urine and you use aged urine, which is 24 hours old or more, it's your own stem cells, and those stem cells will reproduce in 24 hours. So a lot of these creams we buy, like I think it's creme de la mer, which is like a £500 moisturizer. If you look at the side of it, it's going to say urinic acid, or it's going to say, and it's actually pigs or horse piss. So these people are paying £500 to rub a certain amount of pigs or horse piss on their face. Now, why not use stem cells that are like working in naturally with your body, your own? And when I went back to have the stitches taken out, there was almost like, you've healed so quickly. It's almost like we're going to have to thread this open and cut this open. What have you been doing? And I was like, am I going to tell this person that I'm rubbing my own piss on my face? where does this go? So it's very interesting, mate. I think if we're kept out of the light of this, because ultimately no one can make any money out of it. Because if you say to someone, fast and you're going to heal yourself, where has any doctor or anyone going to sell you any pharmaceuticals? If I say to you, drink your own piss and use your own piss on your face and you're going to stay youthful, there's going to be no L'Oreal's going to go out the window, because you're not going to see any adverts of someone saying I'm worth it, flicking their hair and rubbing piss on their face on the telly, are you?
Absolutely. There's not a lot of profit margin if people are kind of, I mean, not just, kind of not eating, not drinking, but, if you are drinking water, or if you're having fruit and vegetables, for a juice fast, again, not huge profit margins, because you can't stick a trademark and you can't kind of, inflate the prices. Do you mind me asking how old you are? Because I'm looking at, some people will be watching this on YouTube. Some people will hear in the podcast. You've got very youthful looking skin. There's a glow to you. Do you mind me asking your age?
Yeah, no, I'm 39 this year.
39. Wow. So for those listening on the podcast, Elliott looks great. So if you're worried about the kind of, are you going to be frail doing these kind of fasts and those kind of things, check out the YouTube version of this interview and then see for yourself. Elliott is a very healthy chap here. Am I right in thinking that the biggest challenge to fasting is yourself? It's your own inner dialogue, it's your own fears, it's your own, hunger and things like that. Is that what you're up against really? It's kind of a battle against yourself.
That's all you're up against in life, mate. What else have we got? This is why when I said to you, I write down everything and I see the stages and I journal everything to make it as easy as possible. Because if it's made it easy as possible for me, when these people come on fast with me, they find it so easy, because I've broken it down in ways where you can, I wouldn't say trick the body, but where you've just said, people will say, I'm going to die if I do this. If you keep repeating that affirmation, every single cell in your body listens and responds to your thoughts and feelings and your words, because these words create vibrations, thoughts create vibrations, and your body responds to it. I think before we went live, we said how we all know someone who's ill, and they always say, oh, I'm constantly ill and I'm constantly this, and they are always ill. And we all know someone who eats 3 McDonald's a day and never puts on any weight and says, I can't seem to put on any weight. I never put on weight. I eat 5,000 calories a day. I don't put any weight. It's because they've created this program within themselves. When we do something for 21 to 90 days, we create this habit. We create a habit that creates a personality. Hi, I'm Elliott, and I can go 40 days without food. That personality then projects my personal reality, and that is my reality that I've created, because my cells in my body are going to respond to those thoughts and feelings and that energy field that I'm walking around with. And coincidentally, that energy field, if we're in a vibration of fear, then it's supposedly thought this energy field can be around 3 inches away from us, which doesn't leave much protection. Whereas if we were in something like gratitude and unconditional love, scientifically it's said up to 9 meters away from us, which means generally things of danger can't come within that. I believe this can be much bigger, but studies have shown that if you're in a car and there's about to be an accident, your palms of your hands will start to sweat around 3 seconds before the accident happens, because your energy field will pick up on it before it happens. But if you're really in tune with your field, the accident would never happen, because you're just going to, we've all walked into a room before and gone, oh, I don't like the feeling of that, shut the door and come out, and it's kicked off in the room, or vice versa. Someone's walked in and walked out. It's because our energy walks into a room before we walk into the room. So when we learn how to tune into this energy field of ours, we're ultimately connected to everything. This is how the flower of life works.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because you get the ends of the spectrum where some people ridicule the idea of energy because it's difficult to kind of prove scientifically. And then you've got, just in kind of everyday language, when people talk about how they're feeling, or if they're at a concert they really enjoyed and they're like, the energy was crazy, or they talk about vibes, intuitively we all experience this, but, scientifically it's quite hard to kind of measure what we're talking about there in terms of this kind of frequency and energy. If someone's inspired by this, curious about this, and they perhaps, I'm a big fan of finding people that have already gone down the path that you're considering going down. And clearly when it comes to fasting, you've trodden that path several times and all different variations of it. So if someone's listening right now and they think, you know what, I'm considering this, there could be health benefits, maybe use it to reset their thinking and take a different direction in life, what's the best way they can get in contact with you?
So I have a Facebook page, which is R666HA13. That was built up several years ago. It's got about 35,000 followers, but since I stopped using it for a year and since the pandemic happened, I seem to have gone from some videos getting 90,000 views to getting about 2 or 3 views now. So I'd like to build that back up. So if you could give that a follow, that'd be great. You can also go to Instagram, MindBodySoulSpiritCoach. And there's also a website which is live, but it's not fully functioning, which is MindBodySoulSpiritCoach.com. So that's in the testing phases at the moment. There's also a YouTube channel, which is Mind, Body, Soul, Spirit Coach. You can contact me at any of those, or MindBodySoulSpiritCoach@gmail.com. And it's interesting you said about trying to express or to talk about something. And I read a very interesting statement today, and it said, what is the meaning of life? And the person said, the meaning of life is like the wind. You can't really put it into words, but you've just got to either ride it or create it yourself. So we're not here to put it into a box. We're here to either ride with the flow of it or go with the flow of it, or to create it ourselves. So
great stuff. I've certainly been inspired by this. I think I'm going to do a fast soon. I might be picking your brains in the near future. We're going to make sure, if you can message me all of those links, I'll copy and paste them straight into the show notes. So it's on YouTube and podcast. That way, if anyone's heard this, you don't need to scribble it down. Just look in the show notes and you can get in contact with Elliott. Elliott, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. If you'd like to do a fast, mate, I'd be more than happy to take you through it. If you was to document it, all I'd ask is that you was to review it with integrity and honesty. Even if you didn't enjoy it, I'd want you to say that, because I like to hold those high standards.
I love public accountability. I'm in. We're going to talk. Definitely do that. Thank you so much. And to you at home, thanks for joining me on Modern Mindset. See you again soon for more.
Thank you for listening to Modern Mindset with Adam Cox. To automatically receive the latest episodes, please subscribe. If you'd like to support the show, please share this episode with just one friend you think it could help. And if this episode helped you, please leave us a 5-star review. Modern Mindset, picking the brains of the world's leading minds to help you unlock yours.